Let's talk about live streaming on a budget. Man, I've heard it so many times that you only need $200 to get this system done, or I can't do this unless I have $1 million system. That's just not true. We can do this in a way that's effective and honestly like really easy for your team to set up week to week. And we're gonna dig into some of that today. We've got things like cameras, obviously, and a video encoder, a video switcher, ways to monitor that, even a portable case if you're in a portable scenario. So we're gonna dig into a lot of that with really the heart that we want this to be something that's easy for you to do on your own and, glean some knowledge from us in the ways that we've kind of thought through this as well. So when we start thinking about live streaming, there are some questions that we want to hit up front. So things like, do we need to stream the entire service, right? Are we just looking at streaming the message portion, or do we want to stream the entire thing with worship, with lower thirds, multiple camera angles, things like that? We want to start really getting an idea of what this final product is going to look like so that we know how to build a system to support that on the other side, especially when we're looking at doing it like on the cheap for a good budget. So really step one here is some questions that we want to be considering and some things that we want to be asking our leadership, right? We want to know the vision for this stream, why we're attempting to build this on our own so that we know the what and how we need to do that. One thing that we want to do is make sure that the gear that we're speccing, the camera, the type of switcher, all of that is, the budget is in check, and we don't want to overinflate with like more inputs than we need or more camera shots than we need and things like that. We really have to identify that first so that we know the sandbox that we're kind of building this in, right? What we're going to be looking at today is the Summit Go. It's the GoPack Pro that we built out a couple years ago. And so we're going to kind of dissect that, some thinking and thought process that we put into this to hopefully help you be able to actually build this on your own and create it. The first piece of gear that we're going to talk through is this streaming encoder. Now, if we were to boil this down, really the only two things that you need to get streaming is this encoder and a camera. You can plug the camera straight in. Most cameras have built-in audio on it, and you can go for it. At bare minimum, man, that's what you're looking at. The other items that we have here are really there to help you in order to make things a little bit better, right? So when you're talking about like what your threshold is of quality as you're kind of developing your vision for the stream, that's something to consider. So again, bare bones, it's a streaming encoder and a camera, and then you can kind of build up your needs from there. But this guy is really awesome. So our friends at Resi, we partnered with them. We threw this guy into the GoPack Pro over here. One of the things that's pretty cool about Resi is the way that they're encoding their video files. It's way more resilient, which is what Resi kind of stands for, in the way that they're doing it. But it does come with a monthly cost as well. And so that's something to think of when we're considering a budget system like this, is what are all the costs associated with it? The device itself is about $700 right now, and there is a monthly cost as well. And so if you can't, chew on the monthly cost at the moment, you can also, there are other devices out there. So there's things like an AJA Hilo is an option. Blackmagic has their web presenter as well. Epiphone Pearl Nano is another option. All of those are just an initial like hardware cost that you buy. YouTube, Facebook, those things, they'll see that as a device to pull the video for. Again, you don't need it necessarily, but this is one of those levels that we put in here that we felt like, man, it just gets that extra little bit of I don't want to call it redundancy, but just like quality of stream. So on the back, the main inputs that you need to kind of look at. So the first one here is an HDMI input. And this guy is where we're gonna be ingesting our video and our audio signal, which we'll talk about later. The other piece here is your network port. And so those are really the two main things that you need to make sure you plug in on this guy. Again, we gotta get video and audio into it, and then we have to be able to control it with their control software. Next piece of gear that we're gonna talk through is a camera. So again, at the end of the day, all you need is the streaming encoder and a camera to get off and running. But again, some of these things do make your life a little bit easier. So what we're gonna talk about today is a camera. One of the ones that I would suggest is this Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera. This is the 6K version. You don't need all those Ks. We're not using all those. But the benefit of this one is it does have a super 35mm sensor. So this guy's gonna get you kind of the shallow depth of field, that cinematic feel that you're looking for, versus maybe more of like a broadcast style. Anyway, the camera runs about $2,000 for the body, and then maybe another $1,000 for a decent lens for it. And kind of the cool thing about going with a camera like this is you're gonna be able to use this to stream on Sundays. You're also gonna be able to use it during the week. And so it can kind of play double duty for what you're wanting it for, capture some events. You can also do like post-produced videos like we're doing now during the week, and then play those back on Sunday, ministry spotlights, video announcements, things like that. This camera right here, it does have an HDMI output on it. So that is something to consider, especially once we start talking about a switcher and how we're gonna get things in and out of the switcher. More consumer-based cameras like this typically have like an HDMI output rather than a dedicated SDI output. But we'll get into that a little bit once we talk about the switcher. So the main thing that you need here is you really need the HDMI out, and you need a power cable for it. You know, we like to loom everything up, so typically that would look like one cable coming out of that with an HDMI and a power, and it all goes back and would plug into that guy to hit a switcher. You know, this thing has a great big old screen on the back as well. The camera can run like multiple output formats, which is cool. So you can do like more of a TV style, like 60 frames per second image, or you can knock that down to like a 24 frames per second to get more of that cinematic style. Next on the list is a video switcher. So again, let me be clear, you do not need a video switcher to stream. Just need the camera, just need the encoder, but this does make your life a lot easier, especially again, if we're talking like a portable setup or adding multiple cameras or getting this into kind of the infrastructure of your existing space. This is the Blackmagic ATEM ME2 constellation switcher. This guy has 20 dedicated inputs, 12 dedicated outputs. I think the 1ME has 10 inputs and 8 outputs, or 10 outputs, something like that. So just a little bit less of an input count. The cool thing about this is you can obviously use it to get video inputs in and out. It's got everything you kind of need here on the front panel as far as changing settings and switching camera feeds and things like that. This is really what you would need in order to do lower third lyrics. You know, if you want to add that onto the stream, things like that, you do need a switcher to do that. So one thing that we talked about earlier was that this camera has an HDMI output, and all of the inputs on this guy are SDI. So how do you get that from HDMI to SDI? This is just it's a Decimator MD LX version. You just literally plug an HDMI cable into the input here, and then come SDI out here, and it converts it to SDI for you. So literally put this in line like that in between the camera and the switcher to get you to SDI. And these range anywhere from $50 to $200, depending on which one you get. So you do need one of these for the camera that we're using today. By getting this in, you honestly can use it for a ton of inputs coming in, your cameras, your ProPresenter feeds, things like that. And then you can use your outputs to like send to your destinations. So you're kind of using it as a router, right? So again, saving cost there. It's not as flexible as if you had a separate router, but it kind of works the same. And so again, one output can go to your main screen at that point. One output can go to a green room TV. The other output could go to like an overflow or a lobby space kind of display. And so again, you can kind of use it as like a distributed router as well. So flipping this guy around, the back side of this guy is where all of your connections happen. So all of your inputs are here, all of your outputs start here. Any output can take any input, basically. And so, you know, it's soft patchable, essentially. And so with this network port, plug that guy into the switch, you know, in your rack, kind of a thing to get it networked. And then you can access their software for it and just tell the outputs what inputs you want it to take. You can do a lot from this front panel here. You can do things like cutting the cameras. I think you can bring keyers on and off, that kind of thing, for lower third lyrics and stuff. But really the meat of all of that happens in the ATEM software control. So up until this point, we've talked about video signal input, but there's this other thing called audio. I don't know what that is, but we need it. So we got to get it in. There's a couple different ways to do that with these switchers. Not every switcher offers this option. So if you do go Blackmagic, it's kind of in your favor there. But we do have over here, there are 2 analog inputs for audio. You can actually bring your audio in from your front of house console, just a left and a right pair, bring that in, and in ATEM software control, you can set that audio to be on your output of your program feed. That is not a common thing on other brand switchers. So if you don't go Blackmagic and you have something else sitting on the shelf that you want to use, you're probably going to need something like this. So this guy is an audio to SDI embedder. So what his job is very similar. His job is to take in audio right here, take in a video signal, and then it kicks out audio and video together on that SDI feed. And so that ultimately is what you would end up sending to your streaming encoder, so that audio and video is on the same line, it's taking the feed, and you're rocking and rolling. Kind of another cool pro tip, if you are using an audio embedder like this, what you can do is you can output the signal that has the audio onto it, so SDI and audio together, outputs from here, run that into an open input on your switcher, and then what you essentially gave yourself is a routable program feed with audio. And so same thing, if the lobby display needs, or the lobby TV or whatever, it needs sound as well with the video on it, you can send it through there. So coming back earlier to what I said about all you need is this guy, a camera, right, and the streaming encoder. That's very true. However, that does mean that you're using the onboard mic the entire time. Again, might not be a deal breaker. You might be fine with it. But I have found that wherever you put this mic, there's usually someone singing super loud right in front of it, and that's all you can hear. So again, not ideal to do that, which is really where the value of this next step, I would call it, adding a switcher and adding an embedder really comes in, because we can take in that front of house broadcast audio feed. We can, then use the one input for the camera that we have, but we can also add other cameras as we can, afford it and scale up a little bit. It also allows us to put lyrics on the screen for the stream, all of those things. Later down the line, you're going to be thinking through of like, how can we make this stream more presentable for people online, and honestly just like a better experience for them. And so again, this is like step one, down and dirty. This is like that next level up to get a better video quality and audio quality. All right, next thing we're going to talk about is a custom interface plate and looms. So these two things will immensely make your life easier. We can call them luxuries, or extra things you don't really need. But man, once you have it, it's pretty incredible. So obviously on the back of the switcher, there are a ton of inputs and a ton of outputs on there. The embedder has inputs and outputs, the encoder, things like that. Everything that's going to go in your rack has a bunch of connections on it. Instead of leaving this open and just plugging your camera directly into your switcher, which you totally can do, what we did here was we spent a lot of time thinking through workflow for people as well. And so all the inputs that you see on this side over here, all of those go into a switcher so that you can easily plug them in on the front over here. So you can see that we gave people 3 HDMI inputs as well as 3 SDI inputs over there, depending on what type of camera they have or what type of input they want to connect into, right? Because you could connect your computer and laptop up to that too if you wanted to. Really just thinking through what devices you have inside and what I/O that you want to be able to connect to it in a way that a school teacher can do it on a weekend to get up and running. So on this side over here, we do have a bunch of outputs as well. And so that's things like, your destinations or different outputs, like flexible outputs that you want to use. So for this one, we have a couple HDMI outputs. So we've got a program output from the switcher, and then we also have a multi-view output from the switcher for really monitoring every camera input that you've got coming in as you're switching and things like that. USB for some courtesy power, like power for a phone or that kind of thing. The other big thing that we have here is we have 2 XLR inputs that you can see, and those are audio inputs. So when we were talking about taking a source from the front of house console, that's where you would plug it into. And then on the back of this plate, that gets wired up to this guy right here. Right? And so again, the point is that this is going to be racked inside. And so instead of you having to reach in, I'm going to say you, it could be a volunteer, right? The same thing. Someone doesn't have to reach in and like plug those in way inside of a rack. They can do it right on the back of a plate. That kind of leads into the next piece of this, which is talking about looms. The way that you group and categorize and design your plate, looming cables really comes into play here, because we want to think through what do we need in a loom of cable versus what don't we need. So with this specific loom that we have, this was made for this camera. So on one end, this is just coiled up, but we can kind of pop them up here. So on one end of the cable, we've got an HDMI cable, and we've got the power input for the camera. So this goes on camera side over here. And then on this side, we've got power output right here. Well, power input technically to the camera right here that gets plugged into like the brick. We like to do a 4-pin XLR for that because we can quickly unplug the power if we need to and loom it in here. Anyway, that's for power, and this is the other side of the HDMI. So the point here is that we can take the camera, we can plug it in. All the cables that we need are in this one thing. And so when you're talking about a portable system and these live in a truck pack case, you know that, okay, this is all I need to grab, and I don't have to go searching for another cable somewhere. You can make these not just for cameras, but you can do the same concept. If you're using this case as like a audio stage IO box, right? And you have all of your inputs on this side or whatever, you can make looms for that to go to different, your keys position could be its own loom. So it's got power and it's got, XLR in it and that kind of thing. So you can use it for a lot more than just video stuff. Something that is honestly a game changer for portable church specifically is thinking through a custom plate design like this. Now yours doesn't have to have a pretty little blue light, but you might think like, man, there's not a ton of stuff on there. If I didn't have it, I could just plug stuff straight in the back, which you can totally do. But when you're designing something for now, but also thinking about future growth, this is just a streaming box, right? This could also be an audio box next to it. And then you can make another one over here. And so when you're thinking a little bit higher level as you're designing these things, that's where like the power and the value can really come in to making setup really fast for you and efficient for your team. Next piece of gear that we'll look at is a multi-view monitor of some kind. This guy is the Blackmagic Duo monitor. And really the value here is, especially if you have a switcher that you're using, if we run 2 outputs from the switcher into the inputs on each of these screens, we then can monitor whatever we really want to. And so one of the values there, and kind of the way that I would set this up initially, would be throwing a multi-view on this side, and then over on this side doing something like the program output or whatever you're sending to the stream, just as like a final, hey, I'm seeing what's going out and it's looking good. The next thing is, I think all of these devices here have network connectivity. And so the next thing that we need is some kind of network switch for that. That could be a 5-port or an 8-port or however many devices you have. Just simple like Netgear unmanaged switch to use. And really the point there is getting all of the gear connected and talking together, which is awesome. And then the very last thing is you will need a computer of some kind. ATEM switchers have their ATEM software control software that you'll need to access if you need to do any like key changes and things like that. And then, obviously with like the encoder, you'll need some way to access their web GUI or however they control their device there. Having a dock here is going to be super helpful because it's going to allow you to kind of consolidate all of those connections that need to go to this computer down to a box that has one cable coming out. And so you're allowed, it'll get you the data and it'll get you the power that you need for those. So yeah, I think all in all this gear was around $8,000 or so. So again, full send it on this for about $8,000. You really only need the camera and the streaming encoder to kind of do what you need to do, bare minimum. So kind of see both sides there, find your middle ground that you like and build it out. And again, a lot of this comes down to, talking with leadership, figuring out why kind of you guys want to be streaming and what the ultimate purpose is for that and what we want the end goal to look like. And then you get to build the how.